We'll go to Chicago to see one of the largest conservatories in the world, home to a coconut seed that weighs 50 pounds. In Arizona, we'll visit a garden dedicated to women pioneers. And later, a whirlwind tour around the world within the comfort of a Florida yard. It's all ahead on Great American Gardens. Hello, welcome to Great American Gardens. I'm Tricia Springer. Chicago is nicknamed the Windy City. Though you may not know it, Chicago gained this title because of the long-winded politicians in the 1890s. But the name stuck because of the brutal winter winds. But even during the harshest winters, the Garfield Conservatory offers the public an escape to the tropics. Presenting items under glass is often reserved for true treasures, objects of great value, distinction, or beauty. And perhaps nowhere is this more true than under the glass dome of Chicago's Garfield Park Conservatory.
We're a chance for the people in the parks to come and see something beautiful.
Because it's all under glass, the treasures here can be enjoyed all year round. A palm house where palms soar nearly 5 stories high. And a fern room that houses plants that are more than 200 years old.
We're really an indoor garden, and we're available all year round, so people can, no matter what time of year, come and see something in bloom.
The Garfield Park Conservatory sits in Garfield Park on the west side of Chicago. The conservatory is a 2-acre garden under glass, housing over 300,000 plants. It's one of the largest conservatories in the world. When it was built, the conservatory was remarkable not just for its size, but also for its originality. It was designed in the early 1900s for the city of Chicago by a famous landscape architect of the time, Jensen.
When he designed this conservatory, it was very unique in the fact that for the first time, he planned an indoor garden. Conservatories traditionally had been made up of potted plants arranged in rows with signs telling people what the plant was. Now they had a full-fledged garden that they could come and look at.
The conservatory proved a popular spot when it opened to the public in 1908. The conservatory is still popular today, and one reason is the Sweet House. Thousands of visitors discover that in this house, happiness does grow on trees in the form of chocolate.
Well, Chicago once upon a time was the candy capital of the world, and we still are a major contributor to the candy industry, and we thought that was a great opening to using that house to kind of convey that message to people about the importance.
Growing along with the chocolate trees are things you might want to serve with chocolate, things like bananas, cinnamon, and coffee. Another of the conservatory's more spectacular displays is the palm house. Here, even the tallest person is dwarfed by soaring palms of every description.
Palm house is 60 feet high and houses a tremendous collection of palms. We even aren't sure exactly how many palms we have in there, a lot.
Holding center court is the majestic Shelia palm. This 50-foot tree is over 75 years old. It was grown from a seed collected during an expedition to South America in 1926. But perhaps the most unusual palm in the conservatory's collection is the double coconut tree.
I'm standing here under the double coconut tree, which is the largest double coconut under glass in the world. This tree is about 40 years old, and it comes from this seed that I'm holding. It weighs about 50 pounds, and it's the largest seed in the world.
The double coconut tree only grows indigenously in the Seychelles Islands off the coast of East Africa. Next to the palm house is the fern room, which features plants that grew in the Illinois region millions of years ago. Cycads, plants that have existed since the Jurassic period, lend a primordial feel.
Probably our most treasured plants inside are those of the cycads and various members of that family. They were old treasures when they were donated to the conservatory back in 1907. We know some of them were already 200 years old then. So having them as part of our room is very important.
Other ancient plants here include diamond maidenhair fern and bird's nest ferns. The impressive collection of plants is not the only reason the fern room is important.
The fern room has great historic importance. We treasure probably more than all of our other rooms in the whole conservatory. It is a room that was originally designed by Jensen himself, and we've tried very closely to keep the original design intact. So if you see old photos of the room from the 1900s, it looks very similar to that.
Brick pathways in the conservatory guide visitors from one room to another. The pathways are original to the 1907 structure, but were discovered under inches of asphalt during recent renovations to the conservatory. Those renovations were the result of the misfortune that struck on a winter night in a part of the conservatory called the aroid house. Aroids are a group of plants with a protruding flower. One bitterly cold night in 1994, the heating system in the aroid house failed. Dozens of plants in this room froze and were lost. The disaster heightened awareness of the conservatory's historic importance. A task force and steering committee were formed to raise funds, and the conservatory was saved. Since then, the Garfield Park Conservatory has reestablished its sparkling presence as one of Chicago's most interesting public attractions, where rare double coconuts, exotic aroids, and cycads, descendants from the age of the dinosaurs, all reside under one roof, a roof of glass. When we return, an Arizona garden that features the plants early settlers needed to survive in the Wild West. And later, a ficus tree that's been a guest of honor at more than a dozen weddings. More when Great American Gardens continues. Men like Davy Crockett and Kit Carson are often mentioned when we talk about pioneers, but women helped settle the West as well. In Prescott, Arizona, there's a garden that specifically pays tribute to the proud legacy of pioneering women. Monuments to the pioneering spirit stand in the center of the town of Prescott, Arizona. These large bronze works symbolize the larger-than-life character of the men and women who settled the West. Also in this small town, the gardens of the Charlotte Hall Museum help tell the story of the Western frontier in living color.
This garden offers a place to come to rest and maybe to contemplate and to enjoy the flowers as well, and to think too of those days that other people walked here before us and prepared the way for us.
This living museum offers a unique perspective on Arizona's history. Native plants used by Native Americans. Vegetables that grow today from vintage seeds. And a rose garden that honors women who made the West their home. Once the home of the first territorial governor, the museum offers 4 landscaped acres with over 600 different plant species. The Charlotte Hall Museum is named after a pioneer woman who first came to Prescott in 1882 when she was only 12 years old.
Charlotte Hall came with her parents from Kansas. Her uncles, her mother's brothers, had already come here and had been mining for gold.
As an adult, Charlotte became Arizona's first territorial historian. Wanting to preserve the site of the first governor's home, she made a deal with the state to develop this site into a history museum in exchange for the right to live on the property. Today, the gardens here are a history museum of their own. Before the arrival of pioneers, this area was home to the Yavapai people. The ethnobotanic garden features plants traditionally used by Native Americans for practical uses. Elderberry leaves were used to aid arthritis, while the hollow stems of the bush were ideal for making whistles and other musical instruments.
Another example is this rabbit bush. They would use this to make beautiful baskets with, and also use the yellow flowers for dyeing various fabrics.
Yellow flowers also pop up in the vintage vegetable garden. These yellow flowers accompany yellow squash, yellow pear tomatoes, and green beans. All the vegetables here are grown from the same types of seeds that pioneer settlers would have planted over 100 years ago, and many of those settlers were women.
This is the Territorial Women's Memorial Rose Garden, representing those women who lived in Arizona Territory from 1864 to statehood in 1912. At first, each lady had an individual rose. Now, with over 400 ladies represented in the garden, each lady is represented by the whole rose garden.
Several of these remarkable women are represented symbolically in the Rose Garden, like Frances Munns, the first woman elected to Arizona's state senate in 1914, where she lobbied for a woman's right to vote nationwide. And Margaret Ale, who arrived in 1864 with her sewing machine and a cat. The kittens that Margaret Ale's cat produced were worth their weight in gold. They helped keep rodents away from the homesteads. Another woman of the Arizona frontier left behind a different type of legacy. While packing for the trip out west, Margaret McCormick made sure to take a little bit of her New Jersey home with her.
This is the French Brazil rose. We call it the McCormick rose because it was brought here to Arizona by Margaret McCormick, who was the wife of our second territorial governor, and planted right at this spot. It blooms only once a year.
The past lives on in the gardens at the Charlotte Hall Museum. Here, native plants reveal their varied uses. Vintage vegetables sprout for a new generation of garden lovers. And roses tell tales of women who left behind a pioneering legacy. Next on Great American Gardens, a curtain of hanging roots greets visitors at this Florida garden. When we come back. This garden we'll visit was once someone's backyard, albeit a very big one. While most backyards might have a barbecue grill, a swing set, and a couple of flower beds, this yard has more, much more. Most travelers bring home a knickknack or two when they go on a trip, but when botanist David Fairchild traveled the world in the early 1900s, he brought home plants and scattered these horticultural souvenirs around his yard. Today, visitors can enjoy Fairchild's botanical mementos when they visit his former home called the Kampong in Coconut Grove, Florida.
It started off with David Fairchild bringing in the most attractive flowers from different parts of the world, the most tasty fruits from different parts of the world, and he stuck them all over the place.
The garden is a hodgepodge collection of botanical treasures from Fairchild's journeys. There's a banyan tree from India that forms a curtain of hanging roots, and an African baobab tree that seems to be standing on its head. This yard is a botanic wonderland.
Around every corner there's a surprise. I mean, something is flowering, something is fruiting.
Flowering and fruiting here are plants from more than 50 different countries. It's a 10-acre estate that Fairchild, a frequent visitor to Southeast Asia, named the Kampong, which means village in the language of Malay. Fairchild was able to collect so many different plants because he was head of seed and plant introduction for the U.S. government in the early 1900s. His job required that he crisscross the globe to bring new plants to America. He's responsible for introducing 2,000 plant varieties in the United States. He planted many of those same varieties at the Kampong, a collection so impressive that the garden was preserved and opened to the public in the 1980s. Today, those visiting the Kampong are welcomed by a banyan tree from India, which Fairchild planted in 1916. It's an unforgettable greeting.
The entrance to the Kampong is quite unique because what you do is you actually drive through a tree and under the roots of a tree.
The dangling vine-like curtain is actually a mass of roots. Unlike typical roots, which are below ground, these so-called advantageous roots start on the branches and grow downward. When they hit the ground, they stiffen and provide support for the tree's enormous branches. While the banyan tree escorts people into the Kampong, this ficus tree from Java acts as a master of ceremonies for many a wedding.
We are standing under this big ficus or fig tree, which is also called the wedding tree. And it's called the wedding tree because we've had 17 weddings held under the tree.
The very first wedding held beneath these branches was in 1939. David Fairchild's eldest daughter was married here. Another unforgettable tree at the Kampong hails from the wilds of Africa.
This is the baobab from tropical Africa. It's also called the some upside-down tree because the roots look as though they are up in the sky and the branches in the ground.
The fuzzy fruit of the baobab is equally intriguing. Long-distance runners in the African country of Malawi eat the fruit because they believe it gives them extra stamina. And beyond that, the fruit is irresistible to play with.
I could do some maracas, some dancing, cha-cha-cha.
Flowers also seem to dance at the Kampong. The petals of the angel's trumpet, a flower found in South America, swirl like a skirt in mid-spin, while the jambu from Southeast Asia does a curtsy dressed in yellow. And birds swing to melodies of their own making. The unexpected is expected at the Kampong. Foreign plants are right at home in this unusual yard. Here, roots cascade from branches, and some trees seem upside down. A trip through David Fairchild's yard is a journey of discovery. When we return, we'll take a closer look at Chicago's Garfield Conservatory. It's designed to look like a haystack. When Great American Gardens continues. Great places we visited today was the Garfield Conservatory. Even though the conservatory's landscape architect, Jensen, was born in Denmark, he had a passion for Midwestern panoramas. He believed that people needed contact with native flowers and plants to feel in harmony with nature. To help people feel connected to the land, Jensen not only surrounded the conservatory with native plants, but the structure of the building itself celebrated rural America.
And he designed the palm house in the shape of a haystack, which he thought was much more fitting to the prairie landscape.
The conservatory reaches up to 65 feet high. It contains almost 105,000 square feet of glass. Originally, the grounds around the conservatory included an abundance of prairie flowers as part of what Jensen called his prairie style. Over the years, the flowers were replaced. Today, horticulturists hope to revive the original look by planting tens of thousands of aster, Mexican hat, and goldenrod. Thank you for joining us on our tour of Great American Gardens. And remember, public gardens are your gardens.